I think people care too much about how good football looks.
I unfortunately 100% disagree, John. Welcome to our new show on Beyond 90, Ball Don't Lie, where we'll be joined by a guest every single week, bringing their controversial, analytical, whatever kind of take they want on football. And I will be either agreeing or disagreeing. So we'll be debating or discussing the take. And this is the first episode, obviously joined by Jon Mackenzie of The Athletic. And yeah, very controversial start. So, John, why don't you get us underway with your thoughts?
Yeah, I think this is mainly born by me wanting to find something that we would disagree on, because I thought it would make a good topic. So I thought, what would Kish really hate? So yeah, this is coming out of I suppose the last few weeks of Arsenal discourse in particular, where we've had 3 years now of Arsenal dominating football in a way that I guess a lot of people would think is not very aesthetically pleasing, and I guess they get into these interesting situations where at the moment they're in 4 competitions, in very strong positions in all 4 competitions, and yet they've had a couple of poor results, and as a result immediately everyone is saying, this is a terrible way of playing football, it's boring, I don't enjoy it, and yeah, it seems as though the aesthetic has become more important than the results getting. But I am of the opinion that football is about winning, always has been, always will be, and actually aesthetics don't really matter too much.
So I want to just give you a couple questions just to expand. The first thing is what point of view are you coming from here? Are you coming from a fan of a certain club? It doesn't matter how that happens. Are you coming from a fan of just football in general? Are you coming from the view of a more personal point of view on your team, or just football in general?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I'm coming at this from the point of view of someone who spends a lot of time analysing the game. I should also say I've worded my statement in a way that isn't to say that aesthetics isn't important, and I do care about aesthetics, right? Everyone does care about aesthetics. The things that you think are good and bad often tie up with like aesthetic decisions and things that you like, right? So you might think a team is playing well because you like to watch them play, right? Regardless of results. But I do think that the underlying concept of all football has been, it is a game, and games are played to be won. I guess we could talk about maybe the levels that we're talking about here, because I think I have no problem whatsoever with the idea of like if you enjoy playing football and you want to you want to play in a certain way, that's totally fine. But at the top level of the game, I think it's always been about winning. It's been about being successful, and I actually think that like this aesthetic veneer that people paint over it has a lot more to do with the fact that football has become an entertainment business, and therefore it is actually governed by, I suppose, more capitalist notions of like good or bad aesthetics. So yeah, I'm coming at this mainly from an analyst point of view. My team are Leeds United, who are currently playing a very, I suppose, dour brand of football. But I don't know necessarily that like I enjoy. I don't know. I think I enjoy watching them from the point of view that it's tough to stay in the Premier League, and they're a promoted side, and I like the way they're going about staying in the league. So I guess I enjoy it from that point of view. Whether or not that's an aesthetic enjoyment, I suppose is up for debate. But that's the sort of background I'm coming at this from.
So yeah, I think John has brought this because he knows that I wholeheartedly disagree with everything he's saying. But I think coming from a fan's point of view of your club, I think results are always massive. Like, if you play awfully but you nick a win last minute, or not even last minute, if you nick a 1-0 win, awful game in the league, you'll take that. I think where I'm looking at football in general, my point of view is football for me has always been about enjoyment. I've only ever got into football because I enjoy it. Now, what things people enjoy, I think, are different. Like, I think personally, I would always rather watch a Hatem Ben Arfa over a Declan Rice, for example. And I would, if it was my last day on earth and I had to watch a last game of football, I'd rather watch Hatem Ben Arfa play than the Declan Rice. And I think that's that's the way I come and looking at it. And I think the other thing I wanted to bring is like, and there's obviously different reasons why there's aesthetics. I think there's a certain style of, you can get down to the specifics of like the way that someone strikes the ball, for example. I find Salah a really uncomfortable watch. I think this has been debated before, but I've always said, and me and my friend have always disagreed on this, that Salah is an untechnical player. And I think technique, for example, is the way you carry out a certain action rather than being able to carry out that action. So I think Salah was obviously scored some outrageous goals, but even the best goals he scored, for me, they didn't look nice on the eye. And I don't know, that's coming from like a kind of pretentious way of viewing football, I think. But then you look at, I think the players that go down in history, or the players and teams that are remembered for years to come, and I think it is those ones that come with a style, make people feel a certain thing. So I think the most famous team of all time is probably Brazil 1970, right? And that was heavily to do with their style, heavily to do with entertainment. I think the Dutch teams as well, obviously very innovative tactically, but also supposedly very entertaining. Obviously, I didn't watch these teams play because way before my time, but
I'd like to say
I
that
think
it's also way before my time as well.
but I think the way that people view it on how it looks is definitely down to personal preference. But I will always see football for me as entertainment. I've never been like one of those. I've always said as a Spurs fan, this wasn't just a defense mechanism. Like at the time, I was always like, I'd rather see us play amazing football every week, and finish 5th, 4th, have really fun players to watch, then see us play really boring football, finish 13th, but win an FA Cup. I always said that. And I realized that I might be in the minority there, but that is the way I view football is purely enjoyment. That's both playing and both watching. And I'm obsessed over it, but it will always be for me something for entertainment. Yeah.
I guess the difficulty here is that like often those things overlap, right? Which is why at the beginning I talked about Arsenal, where when they were winning everything, people weren't really talking about the aesthetics of how they played. Whereas I think for 3 years now I've been talking about Arsenal issues with Arsenal's in possession approach, particularly with respect to things like risk aversion. And I was sort of laughed off for the most part because I think people were saying, look, it's working, so there can't be issues with this. But it's very interesting, I think, that the aesthetics are actually quite important when it comes to how quickly people will get tired of not winning. So, there's so many coaches, right, where they've been efficient for a long, long time. Suddenly they stop being efficient and their football is bad. And the fans have very little tolerance with what is being produced as a result. I think that's because, if the winning isn't there, the next thing that you want to think about is like the aesthetics, right? At least if, like you say, you're winning play or losing playing nice football, then the aesthetics matter. But I think it goes the other way as well, right? Insofar as, like you said before, I would much rather finish 4th or 5th and play nice football. But, that's still winning a lot, finishing 4th or 5th.
Yeah.
And I guess the nice counter to that is Postecoglou's football. I mean, Postecoglou's football maybe wasn't particularly pretty by the end, right? But in many respects, it was it was a kind of football where you had the sort of, and I guess in many respects, like Postecoglou started out at the aesthetic end of the spectrum at Spurs, and then when the results stopped coming, then fell into a bit more of a pragmatic approach, which I guess then produced the kind of football that, as you say, won a cup competition, but I think very quickly was like unenjoyable.
Yeah, I think that was actually going to be my next question, is like, can you think of examples? Because I think throughout time, this could be wrong, but I think a lot of the time winning football is aesthetically pleasing. I think the best players are fun to watch more often than not. Mm-hmm. Creating lots of chances is fun to watch. I guess not necessarily high pace, but like, like quick passing, quick movement, rotations, all those things are very aesthetically pleasing to watch. I think about PSG, for example, last season. The idea that this player can pick up a pocket here and then this player can go there, that is like, I think it's aesthetically pleasing because it looks so natural, but also looks so synchronized, I guess, and that looks nice on the eye. But I was going to ask you, can you think of examples, maybe barring Postecoglou, where the aesthetics are there but the results aren't? And the first person who came to my mind was Bielsa.
Yeah, I mean, Bielsa's an interesting one, right? Because I think he's always coached teams where the expectation hasn't been to win all your games. I think his sort of superpower was the ability to take players who were less good and rise the level of the squads that he worked with, right? The fact that, a Leeds United team that had Luke Ayling and Stuart Dallas and Liam Cooper in it could look as good as they looked in that first season in the Premier League, is a real testament to his ability to coach. And look, I agree with you on a lot of these things. I think people think that because I focus on out of possession stuff a lot of the time that I would prefer to watch a Declan Rice over a Hatem Ben Arfa, but that's not the case. And the other day, you and I went through the Premier League, right, and went through like the players that we liked from each team. And I think you were quite surprised at a lot of the players that like I pulled out as the players that I like to watch. But I was gonna say also that like maybe a big part of this for me comes from the fact that I do analysis, and I think when you do analysis, aesthetics are a really tricky topic. And it's something that I've been thinking about a lot recently, because I think, interestingly, if we draw a timeline over what we've been talking about so far, I think often a lot of the people who talk about aesthetics now in the modern game are very nostalgic to a time before the rise of a lot of kind of structural solutions, both in and out of possession, to trying to control games. I feel as though what's happened is we've sort of gone from a period where coaches found solutions through individuals. Your better players would win games for you, and then there was a realization: if we can get the team working together and make the team better than some of the parts, we can control and win games that way, right? Which is, I think, a big factor in why a lot of people will say modern football is not fun to watch anymore. I think we're going back in the opposite direction, though. I think we're going back towards like teams creating chaos in order to destructure opponents, and therefore the deciding factor is going to be individuals. But I think what's interesting about the modern game is that like those individuals are now being distinguished at the level of like physicality more than technicality right now. I'm sure it will change in the future. But I think as an analyst then, working in a context where we're having to sort of juggle all of those kind of ideas, it used to be the case that, you would point to structures and say, this is what's going on in a game. They're defending in this way. They're building possession and controlling possession in this way. Whereas it's a lot more about chaos now and direct attacking and physical duels, etc. As a result, I think I think all of us still have aesthetic like judgment calls that are based on the past. And so when I'm analysing, sometimes you can be like, this football doesn't look good, but it's effective. And so maybe the reason why I have come to you with this statement is because I think one of the hardest things to do as an analyst is to put your aesthetic preferences behind you and actually tell people what's going on. And in that respect, I'm employed to be unaesthetic, right? To not have preferences and to be like, this is what's going on in the world of football. These are the things that are working and these are the things that are not. And often like the things that are working will be things that I don't personally enjoy. Sometimes they will. And I think that's maybe what's interesting, given what you talked about before, saying the winning football is aesthetic football. I think that was true 10 years ago, often. Maybe it went a bit too far in the last 5 years towards being like, risk averse and therefore not attractive. But now I think that things are very different, and it's almost hard to put your finger on like what is aesthetically pleasing. I mean, Declan Rice is a very, very popular player. A lot of what he does, particularly on the ball, I don't find particularly aesthetically pleasing, right? But there is something aesthetic about the way that he can cover space, right? And that the fact that he can close people down with like, reduce separation, stuff like that. And I guess that's a difficult thing about aesthetics, right? Is that everyone has their own thing that they find aesthetically pleasing. And I wonder how much, winning will change our idea of what aesthetics looks like. Whether or not kids coming through now will be like, oh, that guy just did a monster run and challenged and closed down a runner that was through on goal. That's amazing. Whereas I think we probably would be like, aesthetics, it's, you know, it is your Hatem Ben Arfas, it is your Ryan Cherkys who are doing things with the football where you're like, I understand how difficult that is because I can't even conceive how you might do that.
Yeah, I think this is a great point, and there's a couple points I want to make. I think the first point I wanted to make was I'm so glad that Ryan Cherky has been a hit because, like you said, I think it's always very difficult to put your biases aside, and I know I'm heavily biased towards aesthetics, and I'm not willing to budge on that. But that's kind of what I came up off, I guess, and what I got. Like my first ever footballer that I was obsessed with was Ronaldinho. Like my dad, I remember being obsessed with Ronaldinho and showing me loads of his clips, and that was like my introduction to football. So ever since there, it's just been those sorts of players, and which is why I think I went so heavy on Ryan Cherky, and so like he almost had to succeed at City. Otherwise, I was always big on. I thought he was going to be this amazing player, and I think part of that comes from obviously watching him, but I also just playing and imagining him on a pitch with me and just being like, that guy would just tear and obviously, but in terms of seeing the things he can do that I can't even conceive of, like you said, of other people doing, whereas I think Declan Rice's stuff, it feels very trainable, I guess, even though it's probably not, but it's the conception thing of it. But I think the other couple points I wanted to make was the cultures. So I think in England, I always find it funny when I'm at a match in England and someone puts in a tackle or someone, the ball be running through as if it could potentially go to the striker running in behind, and the defender gets there first and passes the ball back to the keeper. And those things are like massively applauded. And I'm just like, I just don't like, and I think in England, those things are especially, like certain things are especially applauded, and then in like Brazil or in Spain, different things are applauded. So it's definitely, there's definitely a culture point of view there as well. Yeah, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you on that. And again, I don't know, these things I think are so often coloured by experiences of playing as well. I'd be really interested to talk to you about that aspect because I think you and I both played to a decent level. But the impression I get is we're very different kinds of players, right? I think with you are a very sort of aesthetic, technical, like on the ball, like first kind of player. And you know, I don't think I'm the opposite of that, but I'm definitely a bit more of a ratty player. Like I had really good stamina. I was really mobile. I could press like a demon. And yeah, I was lucky to sort of be between both profiles. Probably I was quite technical as well, and as a result, I'm just very much very, very competitive in the sense of like just getting stuck in midfields and winning balls and doing stuff with it. And I think that probably influences our view of things as well. You went through academy systems, right? But then you decided to leave football. And to what extent was that to do with the fact that professional football just isn't very enjoyable, right? In that sense?
Yeah, so I think when I was young, I was technically better than most players that I played around, including certain academy players, I would say. I never was signed to an academy, but I trialed at almost every club in London. I think I found the competitive nature just unenjoyable. I think I remember I was on trial at Brentford, and I didn't track a runner, or I just left the runner, and a coach like screamed at me, and I was only like 12 maybe. And basically said, if you wanna sign here, like you're great on the ball, but you have to do your defensive work. And I mean, to be honest, I didn't have the mental fortitude to probably survive the academy system anyway. I always kind of played within myself, but I think now I've grown up as well. I think my technique can't carry me as much as it probably did when I was a child. So I definitely affect games way less than I used to. When I was a kid, I think I ran games. Now I think I'm a moments player. Like I'll do something that might change a game, but I'm definitely not someone who dominates games. And I'm a bit of a luxury player, I would say. But
that clearly influences your view of the game, right?
100%. And I'm. This sounds. I hope none of my teammates listen to this, but I'll be happy with a game after if I've done like 3 things that most players on the pitch couldn't do, which I know I'm capable of, that a lot of players are not capable of, like, you know, flicking it over someone's head or putting it through someone's legs or something like that. Despite the fact that I haven't scored, I haven't assisted. And those things, it's just how I view football. And like, that's the thing I find beautiful about football. I realize, like you said, when it comes to analysis, this is not helpful. But I've learned the other side, or I'm learning it as much as I can.
I think to stop you on that point, though, I think it's worth making the point that, like, when I'm talking about analysis, I am talking about like top-down team analysis, right, which is becoming less and less, I think, influential in the game in many respects, apart from the out of possession side of the game, which is why I think I just think that games are just much more chaotic now, so it's much harder to sort of read those sort of over-the-top things going on, which is why I think a lot of the kids coming through now in social media are doing a lot more player analysis, and I've seen some of your player analysis, and I think it's fantastic. I think that's where we're at now. I think that, you know, there is an aesthetic maybe at the level of the individual that will probably never go away, and I think it's really useful to have people talking about what this player is doing to be so efficient, right? And often that does come down with aesthetic qualities, like the ability to take a perfect first touch is aesthetically pleasing in whatever, I think, context through time. The ability to do that makes you a better player because you then have space and time on the ball that other players don't have, right? So I do think that's the case. I guess it's, you know, whenever it comes to aesthetic qualities, you just have to be aware of the fact that it's always going to be subjective. And that's, I guess, why I'm bringing this topic up, is because a lot of the time I have to force myself to think, is this actually useful? If it looks good, or if something looks bad, I have to be like, but that actually produced something. So, like, what's the overlap between looking good and being good in an efficient sense?
Yeah, I mean, we can speak about this for hours, but I want to end. I think that's been a great conversation. And again, it does really, really come down to how people want to view football. Obviously, if you're an analyst, you have to kind of take those biases out. If you're a fan, you view football however you want to view football. And if you're just stereotyping here, but if you're an English guy who loves tackles, then that is your right to support football that way. If you're a Spanish guy who loves pass and move, that's also all within your right. So I want to end on a little question for you. Give me a couple players that you think are aesthetically pleasing that you love, and a couple players that you think aren't aesthetically pleasing that you love.
Oh, aesthetically pleasing that I love. Moussa Dembele is just always going to be the answer to that question for me. I don't know. I think because I played a lot of time as a sort of midfielder who had to do a bit of control. Like, I just love midfielders who do neat and tidy stuff in the middle and go under the radar, but everything they do is just correct. And it always works out. I feel like I should say a Leeds United player at some point, but like we've not exactly been blessed with huge amounts of those types of players. Players who look clunky but I think are good. I mean, we've talked about Declan Rice, and he is that, right? That's the reality of Rice, is that often he looks clunky, but like on the ball and off the ball, he's really functional. You've put me on the spot here. You should have prepped me.
Okay, let me just touch on Moussa Dembele quickly.
Yeah, okay.
Do you think he is overrated because of aesthetics? Because a lot of, I'm sure you've seen, every Spurs player who's ever asked the best player they've ever played with is always Moussa Dembele, right? And they played with Harry Kane, they played with Son, but it's always Moussa Dembele. I think he was absolutely pivotal to that Pochettino side. But do you think aesthetics have created that mystique around him a little bit? Or do you think he was equally functional as that?
I mean, you've said it already, right? Like, he was functional. He was completely pivotal to that team because he was the ball progressor, effectively. And I think that's probably why I loved him, because I was watching them play, and I was like, without this guy, they wouldn't be as good as they are. And I don't know. At the time, it felt as though he was massively underrated, but I feel as though history's been quite kind to him in that respect.
Yeah.
I'll say Santi Cazorla was another player who I really, really loved. I like two-footed players because I think it's very clear when you see two-footed players, like how much advantage you get from that. It's interesting enough. I was pretty two-footed in my time, still okay, but like my left foot has gotten much worse the older I've gotten. Because I think it's from a kind of physical mobility point of view, that it's harder to get into the correct positions to use my left than it was. And it's made me realize like how much of an asset that was for me in my career, the ability to be able to just receive the ball either way and know that I could go either way and I would be able to find an escape route. So I definitely have a bias towards both-footedness. Yeah. You watch someone like Ryan Cherky, and again, it's like you can mirror that guy's games, and you wouldn't be able to, that's the point, is that you wouldn't be able to pick up which way that guy's dominant foot is. So I'll include him as well. But yeah, clunky players. There must be some Leeds players who fit into this category. Clunky players who are still efficient.
I'm trying to think of.
Yeah, who would you say to that, out of interest?
See, this is where I'd be stuck, because I mean, best watch for me in the world right now is obviously Ryan Cherky. I think that's clear. But I love Lamine Yamal.
Yeah.
Different type of player that I love watching. I don't think is similar necessarily as Mbappe. Like,
do you think Yamal is aesthetically pleasing?
Yes.
Okay.
As aesthetically pleasing, or aesthetically pleasing full stop.
Yeah, I don't know, because I think you could make an argument that like he's almost like I'm just trying to.
He's very physical. I think this is where it also comes in. I think personality is a big thing. I think the way he carries himself, the arrogance, I think is.
Yeah.
I think I love players who are arrogant. Like, I've always like players who think they're the best. I love that, and both on and off the pitch. And I know this rubs a lot of people up the wrong way, but I love that stuff. And so I think that's a massive thing. I think the way he's tapped into kind of people's nostalgia a little bit, just all the added stuff, like the getting the number 10, like all those kind of things that don't really matter, but definitely do in the kind of full picture.
I think
don't think I'm necessarily tied.
Arrogance, which is born of the knowledge that they can do it, right, which makes it not arrogant, right? And it's that belief that takes them to the next level. I think that's really an important quality.
I think personality is a massive thing. I should have probably referred to that earlier, but I think someone like Ekatike, I think has been so refreshing to the league because of, I just love the way he carries himself.
Yeah.
Obviously very technical as well.
I've actually thought of an answer to the maybe doesn't look aesthetically pleasing but is efficient, and I think this will be taken the wrong way, but I think Bruno Fernandes is a great example of a player that actually, if you look at him aesthetically, it doesn't make sense that he would be as good as he is. His gait, the way that his like biomechanics work. I think we talked about Salah before, right? He's the classic example of this as well. But I think Bruno Fernandes has that as well. I think Bruno Fernandes is like a player who I absolutely love, which is hard for me to say as a Leeds fan. But I think he's been underrated because he's been put in the sorts of teams that he's been put in for so long. I think that he will, in the modern era now, I think he will be just a cheat code player. And the fact that Carrick is using him in a way that actually accentuates his positive attributes is going to mean that he will carry this Man United team, I think, far under Carrick this season. Just dropping into pockets of space, but with the ability to play like outrageous first-time passes to break presses. I think he's going to look great in this system. Yeah,
that's a great one to end on, because I enjoy watching Fernandes as well, and I don't think he's that. I think the way he strikes the ball isn't necessarily that beautiful, but I appreciate how willing he is to try things, regardless of how many times he loses the ball.
What do you think of De Bruyne then on that note? Because like De Bruyne and Fernandes are similar kinds of players, right?
Yeah, and I liked De Bruyne, but like he wasn't the City player I'd love to watch. I think what he did was in certain games was just so impressive. The way he could carry the ball in transition.
He was like crazy efficient, right, in that respect.
Yeah. And like to be able to do a 40-yard run, and then
be productive at the end of it.
Have the energy at the end to still be efficient is crazy.
Yeah.
But then I would look at that team and I'd be like, I love to watch Leroy Sané in that team.
Right.
He's like he's graceful and like the way he can glide and so yeah, I know I'm biased to players that are less good that are.
Is it smoothness that we're talking about though? Is that what we're talking about?
There's difference. I think there's it's not just one type. I think there's smoothness in terms of they're elegant. I'd say the way like Sané glides, I think that feels smooth. There's obviously the technical, like intricate stuff like Shirky. But also like centre backs, I love that can pass the ball really, really well. That's like another weird one for me. I love strikers who either two types of finishes. One, dink the keeper. That's like my favourite ever finish. Like, but not like just a small little clip over them. Or strikers that roof of the net near post, like Aguero used to do all the time. There's just certain little like things that I love to watch. But we can speak about this all day, so I'm gonna have to wrap it up. Thanks for watching, guys. There are many, many more guests to come on this. I'm sure Jon will be back with another outrageous take. And yeah, please do subscribe. Please do comment who you want to see on here. We've got a few guests lined up, but love to hear what you guys want to see. And yeah, Jon, thanks for coming.
Thank you so much.